Let me tell you something about electricity. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your business degree. It doesn't care about your quarterly budget reports, or your cost-cutting initiatives, or your fancy PowerPoint presentations about operational efficiency. Electricity follows the laws of physics, and if you don't respect those laws, if you don't understand those laws down in your bones the way a person understands how to breathe, then electricity will teach you a lesson you will never, ever forget, if it lets you survive long enough to remember it. My name is Mike Delvecchio. I'm 52 years old, and I have been a licensed master electrician for 27 years. I hold a master electrician license in 3 states. I hold specialized certifications in medium voltage switching, industrial control systems, programmable logic controllers, variable frequency drives, and arc flash hazard analysis. I have logged over 47,000 hours of hands-on electrical work in my career. I have personally wired, maintained, troubleshot, repaired, and upgraded every single electrical system in the Hartfield Foods processing plant in Dearborn, Indiana, from the 4,000 amp main service entrance all the way down to the emergency exit signs in the break room. Every panel, every transformer, every motor control center, every conduit run, every junction box, every single circuit in that building has had my hands on it at some point over the last 27 years. I started at Hartfield Foods when I was 25 years old. I had just finished my apprenticeship under a man named Gerald Kowalski, a master electrician who had been in the trade since 1968. Gerald was old school. He was the kind of electrician who could listen to the hum of a transformer and tell you if the harmonics were off. He could smell an overheating wire inside a sealed panel from 10 feet away. He taught me that being an electrician isn't just about knowing the National Electrical Code, although you'd better know every page of it. It's about developing an instinct, a sixth sense for how electrical systems behave, how they age, how they fail, and most importantly, how they can kill you if you get complacent. Gerald retired in 1999, and I took over as the sole master electrician at the Hartfield plant. And when I say sole master electrician, I need you to understand what that means. The Hartfield Foods processing plant is a 240,000 square foot facility that operates 22 hours a day, 6 days a week, processes and packages frozen food products, chicken tenders, fish sticks, frozen dinners, that sort of thing. The facility runs on a 4,800 amp, 480 volt 3-phase electrical service fed by 2 redundant utility transformers. There are 6 motor control centers, 14 distribution panels, over 300 electric motors, ranging from fractional horsepower up to 500 horsepower, 2 massive refrigeration compressor systems, 8 packaging lines, a full ammonia refrigeration system with its own electrical controls, emergency generator backup systems, fire alarm systems, and enough wiring to stretch from Dearborn, Indiana, to Chicago and back twice. I knew every inch of it. I had drawn updated as built diagrams of the entire electrical system by hand, because the original blueprints from 1981 were so outdated they were essentially fiction. I had labeled every single circuit in every single panel. I had created a maintenance schedule for every critical piece of electrical equipment in the building. I had a notebook. Well, honestly, it was more like a library of notebooks, documenting every repair, every modification, every anomaly, every quirk of that electrical system, going back to 1997. I knew that the number 3 feeder to motor control center C had a slight voltage imbalance that had been there since 2004 when the utility company replaced a pole transformer and didn't quite get the tap settings right. I knew that the south refrigeration compressor had a soft ground fault on the B phase that only appeared when humidity exceeded 80%. I knew that the emergency generator's automatic transfer switch had a relay that would occasionally stick if the ambient temperature in the electrical room dropped below 55 degrees. And I had written a maintenance procedure to exercise that relay every 2 weeks during winter months to prevent exactly that scenario. That is not the kind of knowledge you can Google. That is not the kind of knowledge you can hand off in a training manual. That is 27 years of institutional knowledge living in one person's head and in one person's notebooks. And for 27 years, the plant managers at Hartfield Foods understood that. They valued it. They respected it. They paid me accordingly, and they left me alone to do my job. Until Tyler Pennington showed up. I remember the exact day. It was a Tuesday, March 14th. I remember because I was in the middle of performing the annual infrared thermography scan on Motor Control Center B, which I always scheduled for the second week of March because production volume was slightly lower during that period, and I could get better access to the equipment without disrupting operations. I had my thermal imaging camera set up, I had the panel covers removed with proper barricades, and arc flash PPE staged nearby, and I was methodically scanning every connection, every bus bar, every breaker, looking for hot spots that would indicate loose connections or deteriorating components. This is preventive maintenance. This is how you catch problems before they become catastrophes. This is the kind of work that nobody notices when you do it right, but everybody notices when you don't do it at all. I was about halfway through the scan when Dave Morrison, the plant manager, walked into the electrical room with a young man I had never seen before. Dave was a good man. He'd been the plant manager for 11 years, and he and I had a solid working relationship built on mutual respect. Dave understood that he didn't know anything about electricity, and he trusted me completely on all electrical matters. In return, I kept his plant running, I kept his people safe, and I kept his electrical systems in top condition. It was a simple, effective arrangement. But that day, Dave looked uncomfortable. He had that look on his face that managers get when they're about to deliver news they don't agree with, but have been told to deliver anyway. His jaw was tight. His eyes kept flicking sideways to the young man standing next to him like he was silently apologizing in advance. The young man was about 30, maybe 31. He was wearing brand new khaki pants that still had the crease from the packaging, a blue button-down shirt that was just a little too tight across the shoulders in that way, that suggested he'd bought it to look bigger than he was, and shoes, dress shoes. In an industrial plant, polished brown leather dress shoes on a concrete floor that had decades of machine oil, coolant, and chemical residue ground into it. I noticed the shoes first because that told me everything I needed to know. Anyone who had ever spent a single day working in a manufacturing environment would know that you wear steel-toed boots. Period. No exceptions. The shoes told me this person had never set foot in a facility like this in his life. Dave cleared his throat. Mike, I want you to meet Tyler Pennington. Tyler is our new operations supervisor. He's been brought in by corporate to oversee several departments, including maintenance. I set down my thermal camera and pulled off my safety gloves. I extended my hand. Nice to meet you, Tyler. Tyler shook my hand. His grip was the kind of aggressive, over-firm handshake that people use when they want to project confidence they don't actually feel. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It was a performance smile. A boardroom smile. Mike. Great to meet you. Dave's told me a lot about you. 27 years, huh? That's impressive tenure. Tenure. He used the word tenure, like I was a college professor clinging to a cushy appointment. Not experience, not expertise. Tenure. Yeah, 27 years. I know this plant's electrical systems better than anyone alive. Tyler nodded in that rapid, dismissive way that people nod when they're not actually listening, when they're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can say what they already planned to say. That's great, that's great. Listen, I'm going to be spending the next few weeks getting a handle on all the departments, learning the operation, looking for efficiencies. Corporate has given me a mandate to find cost savings across the board. and I want to make sure every dollar we spend is being spent effectively. I'll probably have some questions for you down the road. Sure, I said. My door's always open. Well, I don't have a door, I have an electrical shop. You know what I mean. Dave forced a small laugh. Tyler didn't laugh at all. He just did that nodding thing again and glanced around the electrical room like he was appraising a used car. His eyes moved over the motor control centers, the panels, the conduit runs overhead, the neatly organized shelves of spare parts and tools that I had maintained for decades. He looked at all of it with the blank, uncomprehending gaze of someone who had absolutely no idea what any of it was, or what it did, but was already calculating its cost on a spreadsheet in his head. What's all this? He asked, gesturing vaguely at the open panel I'd been scanning. Annual infrared thermography scan, I said. I scan every electrical connection in the main distribution equipment once a year to check for hot spots. Loose connections, deteriorating components, overloaded circuits. If you catch a hot connection early, you tighten it or replace the component. If you don't catch it, it fails catastrophically, and you're looking at an arc flash, a fire, or a total system failure. This scan takes me about 3 days to complete for the whole plant. Tyler stared at the thermal camera, then at the open panel, then at me. 3 days. For one guy to walk around looking at a screen. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I'd heard that tone before. Not from anyone at Hartfield, but I'd heard it at trade conferences, in stories other electricians told. It was the tone of someone who was about to fundamentally misunderstand the value of what they were looking at. It's a little more involved than that, I said carefully. Each connection needs to be individually evaluated. I compare the thermal readings against baseline data I've collected over the last 15 years. I'm not just looking for things that are hot. I'm looking for things that are hotter than they should be, relative to their historical normal. A connection that reads 140 degrees might be perfectly fine on one breaker, and a serious warning sign on another, depending on the load characteristics, the age of the connection, the type of conductor, and the ambient temperature. It takes experience to interpret the data correctly. Tyler smiled that performative smile again. Well, we'll see if there are ways to streamline some of these processes. Efficiency is the name of the game. He clapped his hands together once, like a coach breaking a huddle. Great meeting you, Mike. I'll be in touch. He walked out. Dave lingered for a moment, and the look on his face told me everything. He looked like a man watching a slow-motion car accident. Mike, he said quietly, just be patient with him. Corporate pushed this hire hard. I didn't have a choice. What's his background? I asked. Dave hesitated. MBA from some online program. He was an assistant manager at a distribution warehouse before this. Logistics, inventory, that sort of thing. Does he have any manufacturing experience? No. Any maintenance experience? No. Any technical background at all? Engineering, anything? Dave just looked at me. The silence was the answer. Great, I said. I turned back to my thermal camera and went back to work. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Tyler Pennington move through the Hartfield plant like a wrecking ball in dress shoes. He questioned everything. Not in the curious, learn from the expert's way that a good new manager should. He questioned everything in the aggressive, I already know better way the bad new managers do when they're desperate to prove to corporate that hiring them was the right decision. He questioned why the maintenance department needed 3 full-time mechanics when, according to his spreadsheet, the machines only broke down an average of 4 times per month. He didn't understand that the machines only broke down 4 times per month because 3 full-time mechanics were performing preventive maintenance on them every single day. He questioned why the quality assurance lab needed a specific brand of testing reagent that cost $47 per liter, when a comparable product was available online for $12 per liter. The quality manager tried to explain that the cheaper product wasn't actually comparable, that it had different sensitivity thresholds that would produce unreliable results, but Tyler waved her off and ordered the cheap reagent anyway. 3 weeks later, an entire production run of chicken tenders nephew failed a bacterial screening at the customer's receiving dock because the cheap reagent had given a false negative on the initial in-house test. That recall cost the company $180,000. But Tyler never seemed to connect these dots. In his mind, every failure was someone else's fault, never a consequence of his own decisions. The bacterial recall was the quality manager's fault for not properly validating the new testing protocol. The fact that she had explicitly warned him against switching reagents, in writing, in an email he had replied to with the words, "Proceed as directed," didn't seem to register in his mind as relevant information. And then Tyler turned his attention to me. It started with the questions. Not direct questions to my face at first. Questions through the back channels. He asked Dave Morrison how much I was paid. He asked the HR coordinator for a copy of my job description. He asked the accounting department for a breakdown of the maintenance electrical budget going back 3 years, including my salary, my overtime, my tool allowance, my training and certification costs, and the cost of every spare part and piece of equipment I had requisitioned. Then the emails started. The first one came on a Thursday afternoon. Subject line, Electrical Department Efficiency Review. Tyler had written a 6-page document, single-spaced, analyzing what he called the cost center profile of the electrical maintenance department, which was just me. I was the entire department. The document was filled with charts and graphs and buzzwords, but the core argument boiled down to 3 points. Point 1. My salary plus benefits and overtime was costing the company $147,000 per year. Tyler felt this was significantly above market rate for a single maintenance position. Point 2. The annual budget for electrical spare parts, tools, and testing equipment was approximately $31,000 per year, which Tyler described as excessive given the age and stability of the facility's electrical infrastructure. Point 3. Tyler proposed replacing my full-time position with a combination of a lower-cost electrical technician, working full-time at roughly half my salary, supplemented by an outside electrical contractor on an as-needed basis for specialized tasks. I read the document 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. Then I composed a very careful, very professional response. I explained the difference between a master electrician and an electrical technician. I explained that a technician, depending on their license level, might be legally qualified to perform basic wiring and troubleshooting, but would not be qualified or legally permitted to perform work on the medium voltage systems, to design or modify electrical installations, to pull permits, or to supervise electrical work that required a master electrician stamp of approval under Indiana state law. I explained that the spare parts budget he considered excessive included critical backup components for equipment that had lead times of 12 to 16 weeks for replacement, and that without those spares on hand, a single component failure could shut the plant down for months while we waited for a replacement to be manufactured and shipped. I explained that the outside contractor model he proposed would cost the company significantly more money in the long run because contractors charge emergency rates, they don't know the plant systems, and they would need extensive time just to understand what they were looking at before they could begin any repair. I sent the email. I CC'd Dave Morrison. I sent a copy to my personal drive. Tyler's response came 20 minutes later. It was one sentence. "Thanks for the input, Mike. I'll take it under advisement." That was it. No acknowledgement of the technical points. No follow-up questions. No indication that he had read, understood, or cared about a single word I had written. "Thanks for the input. I'll take it under advisement." 2 weeks later, Tyler called me into his office. It was the old conference room that he'd requisitioned and converted into his personal workspace, complete with a standing desk, 2 monitors, and a whiteboard, covered in what looked like a flowchart designed by someone who had learned about flowcharts from a YouTube video about flowcharts. He was sitting behind his desk when I walked in, and he had that smile on his face again. That performance smile. Sitting next to him was a young man I'd never seen before. Early 20s, maybe 22 or 23. Sandy blonde hair, thin build, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He looked nervous, he looked young. He looked like he had absolutely no idea why he was there. "Mike, have a seat," Tyler said, gesturing to a chair. "I want you to meet someone. This is Brandon Pennington. He's my nephew." Brandon gave me a small wave. Hey, I said. I already knew where this was going. I could feel it in my chest like the drop before a roller coaster. That cold, heavy feeling. "Brandon has been working with an electrical contractor out of Indianapolis for the last year and a half," Tyler said. "He's enrolled in the apprenticeship program, and he's looking to get more hands-on experience in an industrial setting. I've decided to bring him on board as our new electrical maintenance technician." I looked at Brandon. "What year of your apprenticeship are you in?" Brandon shifted in his seat. Second year. "Second year," I repeated. "So you've got roughly 2,000 hours logged." "About that, yeah." "Do you hold a journeyman's license?" "Not yet. I'm working toward it." "Have you ever worked on anything above 208 volts? Brandon looked at Tyler, then back at me. "I mean, I've been around it." "You personally performed work on medium voltage systems?" 480, higher. "No, not personally. No." "Have you ever performed a lockout, tagout on a motor control center?" "I've seen it done." "Have you ever read a set of industrial electrical schematics? 1. Line diagrams, 3. Line diagrams, control wiring diagrams." Brandon's face was getting red. He looked at Tyler again, this time with an expression that was clearly asking for help. Tyler jumped in. "Mike, Brandon isn't here to replace you. He's here to assist you, to learn from you, honestly, to help me get the electrical department's staffing model to a place that makes more financial sense for the company going forward." I looked at Tyler for a long, quiet moment. I chose my words very carefully. "Tyler, I want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. You want to bring on a second-year apprentice, your nephew, who by his own admission has never worked on medium voltage systems, has never performed lockout, tagout on industrial equipment, and cannot read industrial electrical schematics, and you want to position him as an eventual replacement for me, a licensed master electrician with 27 years of experience in this specific facility." Tyler's smile flickered, just for a second, like a fluorescent tube with a bad ballast. Then it came back, harder and more fixed than before. "I didn't say replacement, Mike. I said the staffing model needs to evolve. Brandon will learn the systems under your supervision. Over time, as he gets more experience, we can adjust your role accordingly. Maybe reduce your hours. Maybe transition you to a consulting basis. The goal is to bring the department's costs in line with industry benchmarks." Industry benchmarks. I wanted to ask him which industry benchmarks he was referring to, because the benchmark for a master electrician managing a facility of this size and complexity in the state of Indiana was actually about 15% higher than what I was currently being paid, a fact I had never bothered to press because I valued stability and I liked my job. But I didn't say that. I didn't say any of the 30 things I wanted to say. Instead, I said, "Tyler, can I speak with you privately?" Tyler glanced at Brandon. "Brandon, why don't you wait outside for a minute?" Brandon practically sprinted out of the room. When the door closed, I leaned forward and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. "Tyler, I need you to understand something. This isn't about my ego. This isn't about my job security. This is about safety. The electrical systems in this plant are complex, they are old, and they are potentially lethal. We run 400 volt 3-phase power throughout this facility. We have motor control centers that can deliver enough fault current to vaporize copper bus bars. We have systems in this building that, if improperly handled, will kill a person, not injure them, not shock them, kill them. An arc flash at the energy levels present in our main switchgear can reach 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hotter than the surface of the sun. Will burn the clothes off your body, melt your tools, and cause third-degree burns from 10 feet away. I have spent 27 years making sure that never happens in this facility. Your nephew, who I'm sure is a fine young man, does not have the training, the licensing, or the experience to work on these systems safely. If something goes wrong, and I am telling you right now that something will go wrong, you will be personally responsible, not corporate. Tyler leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. And then he said the words that I will never forget for as long as I live. Mike, come on. Anyone can flip a breaker. You're not special. You're just expensive. I sat there in that chair for what felt like a full minute, but was probably only 5 seconds. I let those words settle into the room. I let them hang in the air between us like the static charge before a lightning strike. Anyone can flip a breaker. You're not special. You're just expensive. 27 years. 47,000 hours. Every wire, every connection, every circuit in a 240,000 square foot industrial facility. And this man, this child in dress shoes, who couldn't tell the difference between a circuit breaker and a light switch, had just reduced everything I am and everything I do to flipping a breaker. I took a slow breath. I unclenched my jaw, and I made a decision. Okay, Tyler, I said. My voice was calm. Perfectly calm. The kind of calm that comes not from being at peace, but from having already accepted what is about to happen. I understand your position. I want you to understand mine. I'm going to put my concerns in writing, formally, and submit them to you and to HR and to Dave Morrison. I want it documented that I have advised against this plan on the grounds of safety, regulatory compliance, and legal liability. Once that documentation is filed, I will comply with whatever staffing decisions you make. But I want it on the record. Tyler waved his hand dismissively. Sure, Mike. Document away. That's your right. I went back to my electrical shop, and I sat down at my desk, and I spent the next 3 hours writing the most thorough, detailed, and meticulously referenced document I have ever produced. It was 14 pages long. I cited specific sections of the National Electrical Code. I cited Indiana State licensing requirements for electrical work in commercial and industrial facilities. I cited OSHA Regulation 29 CFR 1910.303 regarding electrical safety, related work practices. I cited NFPA 70E, regarding arc flash hazard analysis, and the requirement for qualified persons to perform work on energized electrical equipment. I cited the specific incident energy calculations I had performed for every piece of switchgear in the plant, calculations that determined what level of personal protective equipment was required to work on each piece of equipment, and more importantly, who was qualified to perform that work. I documented every critical system in the facility that required a licensed master electrician to maintain. I documented the specific risks of allowing an unlicensed, undertrained person to perform work on those systems. I documented the potential consequences, including equipment damage, fire, personal injury, death, OSA fines, loss of the facility's certificate of occupancy, loss of insurance coverage, and criminal liability for negligent supervision. I printed 4 copies. I hand-delivered one to Tyler. I hand-delivered one to Dave Morrison. I hand-delivered one to the HR coordinator. And I kept one for myself, which I took home and placed in a fireproof lockbox in my closet. Tyler signed the acknowledgement of receipt without reading it. I know he didn't read it, because he signed it in less than 10 seconds. And the first page alone would have taken 5 minutes to read. He just scrawled his name, handed it back, and said, "Got it. Thanks." Dave Morrison read it. I know because he called me into his office later that afternoon, and he looked like a man who had just been told he was sitting on a bomb. "Mike, is all of this accurate?" he asked, holding up the document. "Every word. And you really believe that if Brandon Pennington works on these systems without proper supervision and licensing, the consequences could be this severe? Dave, I don't believe it. I know it. I've seen what happens when unqualified people work on energized industrial electrical systems. I did my journeyman rotation at a steel mill in Gary, Indiana, and in my first year there, a second-year apprentice bypassed a lockout on a 480-volt motor starter because he thought the circuit was dead. It wasn't dead. The arc flash blew him backward 9 feet, lost 3 fingers on his left hand and had second and third-degree burns over 40% of his upper body. He was 23 years old, and that was a motor starter. If someone makes that same mistake on our main switchgear, Dave, they won't lose fingers, they'll lose their life. Dave put the document down. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'll talk to Tyler. It won't matter, I said. He doesn't know what he doesn't know, and he's not the kind of person who can admit that. I was right. Whatever Dave said to Tyler, it didn't change anything. 2 days later, I received a formal email from Tyler, CC'd to HR, informing me that Brandon Pennington had hired as an electrical maintenance technician effective the following Monday, and that I was to develop a comprehensive training plan to bring Brandon to full operational capability within 90 days. 90 days. He wanted me to compress the knowledge and skill that takes 5 years of formal apprenticeship plus decades of hands-on experience into 90 days. For a kid who couldn't read a one-line diagram, I wrote back one sentence. Acknowledged. Please see my previously submitted safety concerns document, which remains applicable. Brandon started the following Monday. I will give the kid this much credit: he was not the problem. Brandon was polite, he was eager, and he was clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. On his first day, when I walked him through the main electrical room and showed him the switchgear, he went visibly pale. That's 480 volts in there, he asked, staring at the main breaker. 480 volts 3-phase, with an available fault current of 65,000 amps at the main bus, I said. Enough energy to turn the air inside that cabinet into plasma. If that door was open and an arc flash occurred, the pressure wave alone would throw you across the room before the heat got to you. The thermal energy would be equivalent to several sticks of dynamite. Brandon swallowed hard. My uncle said, it was mostly just basic maintenance. Changing light ballasts and stuff. Your uncle has no idea what goes on in this room, Brandon, and that's the problem. I spent the next 6 weeks trying to teach Brandon what I could. The kid wasn't stupid. He was just catastrophically unprepared for the scope of what he was being asked to do. I started him on the absolute basics. Circuit identification, panel labeling, wire gauge recognition, how to properly use a multimeter, how to read a simple wiring diagram, how to perform lockout-tagout procedures on low-voltage equipment. I kept him far away from anything above 208 volts. I never let him touch anything in the main electrical room without me standing right next to him. I supervised every single thing he did. But Tyler kept pushing. Every week, Tyler would send me an email asking for an update on Brandon's progress, and suggesting that I begin transitioning primary responsibilities to Brandon. Every week, I would respond that Brandon was making appropriate progress for his experience level, but was not yet qualified to work independently on any medium voltage or high energy system in the facility. Every week, Tyler would respond with some variation of, let's accelerate the timeline. Then came the meeting. It was a Friday afternoon, 7 weeks after Brandon started. Tyler called me into his office again. This time, Dave Morrison was there too, and Dave looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Tyler got right to the point. Mike, I've been reviewing the budget projections for the next fiscal year, and I've made a decision. We're going to be transitioning the electrical department to a new staffing model effective the end of this month. Brandon will be taking over as the primary electrical maintenance technician, and will be contracting with an outside firm for any specialized work that exceeds his capabilities. Your position is being eliminated. I looked at Dave. Dave wouldn't meet my eyes. Tyler, I said, are you firing me? We're eliminating the position. It's a restructuring decision. You'll receive a severance package in accordance with company policy. 4 weeks pay. 4 weeks pay. For 27 years. That's what the policy provides. I sat there. I thought about fighting it. I thought about going over Tyler's head to corporate. I thought about getting a lawyer. But the truth is, I was tired. I was tired of arguing with a wall. I was tired of watching an incompetent man make dangerous decisions and refuse to listen to anyone who tried to stop him. And somewhere in the back of my mind, in a place I'm not entirely proud of, there was a quiet voice that said, let him. Let him do this. Let him find out. So I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, I'll need that in writing, along with the full details of the severance package, and I want it documented, that I am being terminated against my professional recommendation, that I have formally advised against this staffing change on safety grounds, and that I am leaving under protest. Tyler waved his hand. Sure, Mike, we'll get you the paperwork. One more thing, I said. When I leave, I'm taking my personal tools with me. I'm also taking my personal notebooks, my personal reference materials, and my personal copies of all documentation I've created. The company will retain the original as-built drawings and maintenance records, but the supplementary notes, the system quirk documentation, the troubleshooting guides I've developed over 27 years, those are my personal intellectual property, and they go with me. Tyler looked confused. What notebooks? You'll figure it out, I said, and I stood up and walked out. I spent my last 2 weeks at Harfield Foods doing exactly what I was supposed to do. I performed my maintenance duties. I completed my documentation. I organized the electrical shop. I left everything in perfect order. The systems were running flawlessly. Every connection was tight. Every component was within specification. Every backup was in place. I had essentially created a time bomb of competence. A perfectly functioning system that would continue to function perfectly, as long as someone who knew what they were doing was maintaining it. Without that person, it was only a matter of time. On my last day, a Friday, I shook hands with the mechanics, the production supervisors, the line operators, the quality team, everyone who had worked with me for years. Several of them told me, quietly, that they thought what was happening was insane. Dave Morrison shook my hand last. His eyes were red. I'm sorry, Mike, he said. I tried. I know you did, Dave. What do you think is going to happen? I looked at him for a long moment. Within 30 days, something in this plant is going to fail. And when it does, Brandon is not going to be able to fix it. And whoever Tyler calls to come fix it is going to walk in here, look at this system, and have no idea where to start, because they don't know this plant. And then Tyler is going to call me. Dave nodded. And what will you say? Depends on how nicely he asks. I walked out of the Hartfield Foods processing plant at 4:30 that Friday afternoon carrying 2 boxes of personal tools, 6 notebooks, and 27 years of memories. I drove home. I parked in my driveway. I sat in my truck for about 10 minutes, just sitting there. Then I went inside, opened a beer, sat on my couch, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The first call came on Monday. Not from Tyler. From one of the mechanics, a guy named Rich Delgado, calling me on my personal cell phone. Mike, I know you don't work here anymore, but I gotta ask you something. The number 2 packaging line went down about an hour ago. Brandon's been trying to troubleshoot it, but he can't figure out what's wrong. He's been checking the motor and the VFD, but nothing seems off with those. Do you have any idea what it might be? I knew exactly what it was. The number 2 packaging line had a proximity sensor on the in-feed conveyor that had been intermittently failing for about 6 months. I had been monitoring it and had a replacement sensor already ordered, sitting on the shelf in the electrical shop, labeled and ready to install. I had documented the issue in my maintenance log, which the company retained, but the detailed troubleshooting procedure, including the specific trick for testing that particular sensor model, which required putting it in a bypass mode that wasn't documented in the manufacturer's literature, was in my personal notebook, which was sitting in my kitchen. Rich, I appreciate you calling, but I don't work there anymore. You need to go through proper channels. Have Brandon check the maintenance logs. The issue should be documented. Mike, come on man. Brandon doesn't even know where the maintenance logs are. They're in the filing cabinet in the electrical shop. Second drawer, organized by month and year. Rich sighed. Okay. Thanks, Mike. The second call came on Wednesday. This time it was Brandon himself. Mike, hey, it's Brandon. I'm really sorry to bother you, but we've got a ground fault alarm on the south refrigeration compressor, and I can't figure out what's tripping it. I've checked all the wiring I can see, and everything looks fine. The production guys are freaking out, because if the compressor stays down, we're going to start losing product. I closed my eyes. The south refrigeration compressor, the soft ground fault on the B phase that only appeared when humidity exceeded 80%. I had documented this extensively. I had developed a specific troubleshooting procedure. I had identified the exact cable run where the insulation was degraded, a 30-foot section of T-wire inside a conduit that passed through an area where condensation from the refrigeration system would occasionally collect. The fix was to pull new wire in that specific conduit run, a job that took about 4 hours and required someone who knew which conduit it was, because there were 47 can runs in that area and they all looked the same. Brandon, I documented that issue in the maintenance logs. Look for the entry dated September of last year. There's a full troubleshooting procedure and a description of the root cause. I looked in the logs. There's an entry, but it just says B, phase ground fault, intermittent, humidity, related. See supplementary notes for full procedure. Where are the supplementary notes? Those were my personal notebooks. Brandon. They went with me when I left. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Oh. Brandon said quietly. The refrigeration compressor stayed down for 31 hours while Brandon and an outside contractor, Tyler, had called and attempted to locate the ground fault. They eventually found it, but not before the facility lost approximately $92,000 worth of frozen food product that had to be discarded because the cold chain was broken. Tyler blamed Brandon. Tyler blamed the contractor. Tyler blamed the production team for not raising the alarm sooner. Tyler did not blame himself, but that was just the appetizer. The main course was still coming. It arrived on a Thursday evening, 18 days after my last day. I was at home, in my recliner, watching a baseball game. My phone rang at 8:47 p.m. The caller ID said, Hartfield Foods. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hello. Mike, it's Dave. Dave Morrison. His voice was shaking. Not nervous shaking. Terrified shaking. The kind of shaking that happens when adrenaline is flooding your system because something very, very bad has just happened. Dave, what's going on? Mike, we've had an incident, a bad one. There was an arc flash. In the main electrical room. Motor control center C. My stomach dropped through the floor. Is anyone hurt? 2 people are on the way to the hospital. Brandon and one of the night shift maintenance guys, a guy named Carlos Gutierrez. Carlos has burns on his hands and forearms. Brandon. Dave's voice cracked. Brandon's worse. He's got burns on his face and chest. They said it might be bad. What happened? Dave took a shaky breath. From what I can piece together, the number 3 feeder to motor control center C tripped on overcurrent about an hour ago. Half the production floor lost power. Brandon tried to reset the breaker. He didn't de-energize the system first. He didn't do a lockout. He just went in and tried to manually reset the main feeder breaker on MCCC, with the gear energized, and without any arc flash PPE. And when he closed the breaker, There was a fault on the line. The breaker closed into the fault, and the whole thing went up. I closed my eyes. I pressed my free hand against my forehead. The number 3 feeder to motor control center C. The one with the slight voltage imbalance from the utility transformer, tap settings. The one I had been monitoring for 20 years. The one that I had documented as requiring an annual torque check on all bus bar connections, because the voltage imbalance caused slightly uneven current distribution, which led to differential thermal expansion, which over time could loosen connections. The torque check that I had last performed in January. The torque check that would have been due again in about 6 months. The torque check that no one would ever perform again, because the only person who knew it needed to be done was sitting in a recliner watching baseball. But even with a slightly loose connection, the system should have held for months, maybe even another year before anything critical developed. The overcurrent trip was the system safety mechanism working correctly. The breaker tripped because it detected a fault condition. That was the breaker doing its job. The correct response to that trip was to de-energize the entire motor control center, perform a full lockout, tagout, investigate the cause of the overcurrent condition, perform an insulation resistance test, check all connections, identify and repair the fault, and only then re-energize the system under controlled conditions with proper arc flash PPE and a clear blast zone. What Brandon did, closing a breaker back into an active fault, was the single most dangerous thing you can do with electrical equipment. It is the exact scenario that arc flash PPE is designed to protect against. It is the exact scenario that every first-year apprentice is taught to avoid in their very first week of training. It is the exact scenario that I had described in my 14-page safety concerns document in graphic, detailed terms, and Tyler Pennington had signed the acknowledgement of receipt for that document without reading it. "Dave," I said, "how bad is the damage to the equipment?" "I don't know. The fire department is here. The whole main electrical room is. There's smoke, there's fire suppression discharge. The whole room is shut down. We're running on the emergency generator right now, but the generator can only handle the emergency lighting, the fire alarm, and the ammonia detection system. Everything else is down. The entire plant is dark, Mike. Every production line, every refrigeration system, everything." "Have you called the utility company?" "Yes, they're sending a crew to check the main service entrance and the transformers." "Have you called an electrical contractor?" Tyler called 3. The first 2 said they can't touch it until they do a full assessment, and they can't get anyone out until tomorrow. The third one asked what the voltage and fault current levels were, and when I read them, the numbers off the placard you put on the door, they said they don't have anyone qualified to work on a system that size and referred us to a specialty firm out of Indianapolis. "Who's the specialty firm?" "Ballard Industrial Electrical Services." I knew Ballard. They were good. They were also expensive, and they had a minimum response time of 24 to 48 hours for non-emergency calls. For an emergency of this magnitude, they would come faster, but their emergency rate was $450 per hour per technician, with a 2-technician minimum. "Dave, you need to call Ballard tonight. Tell them it's an emergency. Tell them you have an active arc flash scene with damaged switchgear, and tell them you need a full assessment crew on site by morning. And Dave, you need to understand something. Depending on the extent of the damage, the motor control center may need to be completely replaced. An MCC of that size, with custom configuration, is not something you order from a catalog. It's built to specification. Lead time is typically 8 to 16 weeks. You could be looking at months without full production capability." Dave was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Tyler wants to talk to you." "I'm sure he does." There was a rustling sound, and then Tyler Pennington's voice came on the line. He didn't sound confident anymore. He didn't sound dismissive. He didn't sound like a man who thought anyone could flip a breaker. He sounded small. "Mike, hey. So, we've got a situation here and I was wondering if you might be able to come in and take a look at things. Give us a hand getting this sorted out. I let the silence stretch. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 7 seconds. Tyler, I don't work for Hartfield Foods anymore. You eliminated my position. You told me, and I quote, anyone can flip a breaker. You're not special. You're just expensive. Mike, look, I shouldn't have said that. I'm asking for your help here. We're in a real jam. People are hurt. The plant is down. I need someone who knows these systems. You had someone who knew these systems, Tyler. You fired him so you could save money and give his job to your unqualified nephew. Your nephew who is now on his way to the hospital with burns on his face because you put him in a position he was not trained, not licensed, and not equipped to. Tyler, that's a consequence. Mike, please. Can you just come in? Name your price. Whatever you want. I paused, and in that pause, 27 years of knowledge, 27 years of experience, 27 years of being the invisible backbone of a facility that couldn't function without me all crystallized into a single, clear moment. My price. I said, all right, Tyler. Here's my price. I want a consulting contract, not employment. A contract. I want $250 per hour, with a 40-hour per week minimum guarantee for the duration of the recovery. I want full authority over all electrical decisions during the recovery period, with no interference from you or anyone else. I want it in writing that my previously submitted safety concerns document is incorporated into the company's official record and acknowledged as having been accurate. And I want a formal, written apology from you, personally to me, to Dave Morrison, and to Brandon Pennington, acknowledging that your decisions directly led to this incident. Mike, $250 an hour. I can't authorize that. Then call Ballard. They'll charge you $450 an hour. They don't know your plant, and it'll take them 3 times as long to do what I can do in a day. Or you can call someone else. But Tyler, I need you to understand something. I am the only person on this planet who has a complete, detailed, working knowledge of every electrical system in that facility. My notebooks contain 27 years of system documentation, troubleshooting procedures, historical data, and institutional knowledge that exists nowhere else. Without that information, whoever you bring in is starting from scratch. On a damaged system, in a plant they've never seen before, with no documentation. That will take weeks just to assess, let alone repair. My price is my price. Tyler was quiet for a very long time. I'll call corporate, he said. You do that, I'll be up until midnight. After that, my phone goes off, and my rate goes up to $300. Corporate called me at 11:30, 7 p.m. Not Tyler. Not Dave. The regional vice president, a woman named Sandra Chen, called me directly. She was calm, professional, and clearly furious, though not at me. Mr. Del Vecchio, I've been briefed on the situation at Hartfield. I've also just finished reading your safety concerns document for the first time. She paused. I want you to know that I was not previously aware this document existed, was never forwarded to the regional office. That's because Tyler Pennington signed the acknowledgement and filed it in his desk drawer without reading it or distributing it. Yes, I'm aware of that now. Mr. Del Vecchio, I'm prepared to meet your terms. All of them. I'm sending you a consulting agreement tonight via email. I need you on site at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'll be there at 6. One more thing, Mr. Del Vecchio. Tyler Pennington's employment with Hartfield Foods has been terminated, effective immediately. I arrived at the Hartfield Foods plant at 5:45 a.m. the next morning. The parking lot was full of emergency vehicles, utility trucks, and a van from the fire marshal's office. The air still smelled faintly of ozone and burned insulation, that distinctive acrid smell that anyone who has ever witnessed an arc flash will recognize instantly and never forget. I walked into the main electrical room and surveyed the damage. Motor Control Center C was destroyed. Not damaged. Destroyed. The arc flash had blown the front panel doors completely off their hinges. The interior of the cabinet was a blackened, melted ruin. Bus bars that had been solid copper were now warped, pitted, and partially vaporized. The insulation on every wire within a 6-foot radius was melted. The concrete floor directly in front of the MCC had scorch marks radiating outward in a starburst pattern. The ceiling tiles above were gone, blown out by the pressure wave. 2 overhead fluorescent light fixtures had been shattered. The fire suppression system had discharged, and the room was coated in a fine layer of dry chemical residue that covered everything like gray snow. It was one of the worst arc flash scenes I had ever seen in person. I spent the next 3 days performing a complete assessment. The damage was extensive. Motor Control Center C was a total loss and would need to be completely replaced. Custom built to specification, delivery estimate 11 weeks. Cost $1.2 million. The adjacent Motor Control Center B had sustained heat and pressure damage to its cable terminations and bus connections, requiring a full inspection, testing, and partial rebuild. Cost $340,000. The main distribution panel had been stressed by the fault event and required complete testing and recertification. Cost $110,000. 2 feeder cables were damaged beyond repair and needed to be pulled and replaced. Cost $95,000. The fire suppression system required complete recharge and recertification. Cost $45,000. The building's electrical room required structural assessment, cleaning, repainting, and replacement of damaged infrastructure, including lighting, cable tray, and conduit. Cost $170,000. Total equipment and repair cost approximately $2.7 million, once engineering, permitting, project management, and temporary power solutions were included. In addition to the equipment costs, the plant was operating at less than 30% capacity for 11 weeks, while the new motor control center was being manufactured and installed. The production losses during that period were estimated at approximately $4.3 million. Brandon Pennington spent 6 days in the hospital. He had second-degree burns on his face, neck, and chest. He was lucky. Incredibly, miraculously lucky. The arc flash had been partially directed away from him by the geometry of the cabinet doors, which deflected some of the blast energy. If he had been standing 6 inches to the left, he would have taken the full force of the blast directly to his face and upper body. At the energy levels involved, that would have been fatal. Brandon recovered, but he carries the scars. He left the electrical trade entirely. Last I heard, he went back to school for accounting. I don't blame him. I blame his uncle, Carlos Gutierrez, the night shift maintenance worker who had been standing nearby when the arc flash occurred. Had first-degree burns on his hands and forearms and temporary hearing damage from the pressure wave. He recovered fully and returned to work 8 weeks later. Tyler Pennington was terminated. He was also named in OSHA's investigation as the responsible party for multiple safety violations, including failure to ensure that electrical work was performed by qualified persons, failure to enforce lockout, tagout procedures, failure to provide appropriate arc flash PPE, and failure to act on documented safety warnings. The OSH fines totaled $147,000. There was a bitter irony in that number. $147,000. Almost exactly what Tyler had considered too expensive to pay me for a year. I worked on the recovery project for 14 weeks. My consulting fees for that period totaled approximately $140,000, which Tyler's replacement, a very competent operations manager named Karen Wisnicki, approved without blinking. When the new motor control center was installed, tested, and commissioned, I personally supervised every connection, every torque specification, every test procedure. I personally verified that every circuit was properly labeled, every protective device was properly coordinated, and every safety system was functional. I handed Karen Wisnicki a complete set of updated as-built drawings, a comprehensive maintenance schedule, and a copy of my supplementary documentation, which I licensed to the company for a one-time fee of $25,000. Then I sat down with Karen and helped her write the job posting for my replacement. A full-time, licensed master electrician. Starting salary, $160,000, which was 15% higher than what I had been making. I even helped interview the candidates. They hired a 43-year-old master electrician named David Park, a sharp, experienced, excellent tradesman. I spent 2 weeks on site with David, walking him through every system, every quirk, every documented anomaly. I gave him the institutional knowledge transfer that Tyler Pennington had thought was unnecessary. As for me, I started my own consulting firm, Del Vecchio Electrical Consulting. I specialize in industrial electrical system assessments, arc flash studies, and, this is my favorite part, expert witness testimony in workplace safety litigation. I have testified in 3 cases so far, all involving incidents where unqualified persons were directed to perform electrical work by managers who didn't understand the risks. In each case, the companies settled. In each case, I told the jury exactly what I told Tyler Pennington. Electricity doesn't care about your budget, doesn't care about your MBA, it doesn't care about your efficiency metrics or your staffing models or your cost-cutting initiatives. Electricity follows the laws of physics. And if you don't respect those laws will teach you a lesson you will never, ever forget. If you survive, so the next time someone tells you that a skilled tradesperson is just expensive, remember this story. Remember the $2.7 million in equipment damage. Remember the $4.3 million in lost production. Remember the $147,000 OSJ fine. Remember the young man with burns on his face who was put in danger by his own uncle. And remember that $147,000 a year master electrician would have prevented all of it. Anyone can flip a breaker, but knowing which breaker to flip, when to flip it, and what happens if you flip the wrong one, that's not a cost. That's an investment, and Tyler Pennington learned the difference the hard way. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me about the worst manager you've ever worked with. I'll see you in the next one.